The trade war between Canada and the U.S. is heating up. With Trump's 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico set to kick off on Tuesday, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced this country's plan to fight back last night while talking about the long, storied relationship between the two countries.
I love that word relationship. It covers all manner of sins, doesn't it? I fear that this has become a bad relationship. A relationship based on the president taking exactly what he wants and casually ignoring all those things that really matter to Britain.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau may not have been dancing through the halls of Rideau Cottage like Hugh Grant in Love Actually, but he did stand up against U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs.
The actions taken today by the White House split us apart instead of bringing us together. Tonight, I am announcing Canada will be responding to the U.S. trade action with 25% tariffs against $155 billion worth of American goods.
That includes immediate tariffs on $30 billion worth of goods as of Tuesday, and further tariffs on $125 billion of American products in a few weeks to allow for Canadian companies to find alternatives.
Our response will also be far-reaching and include everyday items such as American beer, wine, and bourbon, fruits and fruit juices, including orange juice, along with vegetables, perfume, clothing, and shoes.
The challenge with regard to the size of the Canadian retaliation is, any retaliation hurts us as much as it hurts them, even our retaliation as opposed to what they do to us.
Professor Drew Fagan at the Monk School in Toronto says Canadians will feel the weight of the tariffs immediately.
The impact on Americans won't be felt for a while, and the impact on us will be felt very quickly. We'll see it as soon as tomorrow when trading opens.
Fagan says this trade war could also have a massive impact on the value of the Canadian dollar.
Probably also going to see a significant decline in the value of the Canadian dollar. It's only around 70 cents, which is weak. It's going to get weaker. I've seen, some estimates it'll go to 60 cents. Let's see what happens.
And joining me now is Keith Leslie to break down what all of this means. Keith, how will these tariffs be felt here in the most immediate way? Now, are we talking like a $9 head of American lettuce in our grocery stores this week?
Well, I suppose that's possible. I mean, it's going to be on some grocery items for sure. But I think most of the items that Canada has picked for the first week of tariffs that we're imposing here seem to be things that we have alternatives for. We can get other kinds of peanut butter. We can get another kind of motorcycle. We don't have to buy a Harley Davidson from the United States. So I think, as I say, I think a lot of the things that we're targeting right away are things Canadians have an alternative to, and it goes right along with the Prime Minister's pitch, buy Canadian. It's sort of the simplest way that we can do our little bit, as it were, to help the government fight these American tariffs. So for now, I think that makes the most sense.
Now, in terms of timeline, does it seem like these tariffs are more a long-term new reality or a short-term threat?
Boy, that's the big concern, isn't it? I mean, if it's long-term, and by long-term, I mean it could go on for years, as we've seen with previous tariff wars. That's just going to be devastating for our economy and eventually for the American economy. I mean, but even in the short term, if it does, as they're warning that so quickly this could shut down auto plants in both Canada and the United States, that's something that's got to get Donald Trump's attention if he starts losing jobs in Michigan, where he, actually won that state when he wasn't supposed to. So I think this is something to really keep a close eye on, the short-term impacts on particularly the auto industry, which is just so dependent on those just-in-time deliveries.
Is Canada's response enough? Like, can anything we respond with be enough given the sheer size of the U.S. economy?
Well, I don't think actually we can compete dollar for dollar on tariffs. We just don't have, as you say, the size of the economy to pull that off. We can absolutely target. And I like Chrystia Freeland's idea of coming up with, a 100% tariff on Teslas. That's going to get Elon Musk's attention, absolutely. And of course, that's the thing that Donald Trump would have to pay attention to, given that Elon's basically his acting vice president, co-president. I don't know how you want to describe it at this point. But there are absolutely things we could be stronger on. We could, Alberta would hate it and call it unconstitutional, but we could up that 10% tariff at our own 15%, so that makes their energy costs coming in from Canada 25%, like it's making everything else across the board that we're importing from Canada. So there's some other options we have that could get be harsher, tougher actions by us, but we don't want to play all our cards on the first week either.
And speaking of options, will this trade war mean Canada looks to expand or strengthen our trade ties with other countries, say like Mexico?
Oh, it absolutely has to. I mean, let's face it. We don't need to import a lot of grocery items, produce from the United States. We can get it from Mexico. That's something we absolutely have to do. And as far as, how do we respond to Trump? He made it clear in his post online today that, it's really not about the border. He talked again about how, if they didn't subsidize Canada, that we're not an economically viable country and should become the 51st state. This is economic war by Trump, and Canada has to respond as strong as we can.
Well, it can't possibly be just about the border if it's less than 1% of fentanyl that is coming from Canada.
It just seems absurd to lump us in with Mexico. I mean, I'm not saying we should cut Mexico loose, but we all know that the Americans' problems with immigration and with fentanyl is coming from the U.S. border, not the Canadian border. So, I mean, it's something we want to crack down. But we could also work with them on this and say, you're not letting an awful lot of guns are coming through the border. Let's both of us do a better job on the border and controlling the fentanyl and the gun issue.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Keith. I appreciate it. Keith Leslie.